Thank you, Acting Speaker, and it's nice to see you in the chair. And today I rise to contribute to the debate of the Justice Legislation Amendment Bill 2023, and I'm pleased that the opposition are not opposing this bill, and I acknowledge all of the contributions so far. And Acting Speaker, like most weeks in this place, we're making some very important amendments to a number of acts, chiefly the Open Courts Act 2013 and the Court Security Act 1980, and it addresses some of the ways that in which the Spent Convictions Act 2021 operates. And of course, Acting Speaker, there's a great deal of important changes in this legislation, and I don't think 10 minutes will allow me to go to all those amendments, but we'll give it a crack on the areas that have taken my interest, but of course what concerns the Melton community and of course right across Victoria. Acting Speaker, these amendments detail our proposal and creates efficiencies, safety and accessibility in our courts, and I want to acknowledge the member for Albert Park's contribution in regard to speaking to that part of the amendments. Certainly we're making some temporary measures permanent, including pieces in the Open Courts Act 2013 and the Court Security Act 1980, with some changes to improve outcomes for those of us who rely on the legal system. And strengthening these bills through these amendments improves how our courts operate, and it updates them with today's technologies and how we can make them more accessible, and that's exactly what we want, and that is for people to have access and free access to our court system. Of course, one point is about remote access, and I don't think it's out of step to say that I feel like we're still catching up to the lightning speed changes that business had to make in early 2020. And of course this bill wants to make sure that people can still participate in court hearings even when they're not physically present, and sort of keeping our legal system up to date with technology and the way Victoria works today is really important. So joining a court hearing from your own home or office is about convenience and fairness. Of course, this bill also looks at situations where physical attendance might not be the best option, when health risk or accessibility might be of concern. This bill allows the courts the flexibility to find alternatives to having people show up in person, and this is about balancing safety and justice. And of course, by supporting this bill, we're supporting the legal system that's modern, efficient and inclusive, and it means that no matter where we are or what our circumstances are, we can still be part of court proceedings where necessary, and it means justice isn't limited by physical barriers. I also welcome the introduction of the self-identification amendment. If an Indigenous person tells me that they're Aboriginal, my personal opinion should not come into that consideration. We take it on their word that they are Aboriginal. And by changing the threshold for mandatory reporting to the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, we increase the self-governance of our Indigenous people. And through self-identification triggering mandatory reporting, we see improvements to the treatment and the futures of this vulnerable cohort of Australians. And it's another way that the Andrews Labor government is improving the lives of all Victorians. Of course, in instances where VicPol may be of the opinion that a person is Aboriginal, but that person might be unable to self-identify for a range of different reasons, a notification to VALS is still permitted, and access to culturally appropriate legal assistance improves the outcomes for those individuals. It also leads to saving of lives, and it keeps families together. Because just one of the reasons that the upcoming referendum is so vital, we're at the precipice of righting some horrific wrongs and voting yes to the introduction of the voice to our Constitution and the recognition and respect that goes along with that. And I notice the member for Kews at the table here, and she's publicly come out supporting the yes vote for the voice, and it's a shame that not more of her colleagues have come out in support of the yes vote for the voice. But you never know, they may be flushed out at some stage. So I commend the member for Kew publicly coming out with the yes vote. So I want to acknowledge, of course, our wonderful firefighters who have returned from and still currently are in Europe and in Canada, assisting with those extreme fires overseas. And I know that Minister Stitt from the other place welcomed back 45 firefighters back in June after a month-long deployment supporting Canadian personnel across Alberta and British Columbia. And of course, those fires are expected to burn until the snow comes later this year, and we've seen those tragic fires overseas, and clearly we'll be heading into a dire fire season here if it's any indication of what's happened in the Northern Hemisphere. We sent 148 forest fire management personnel to those fires overseas, 95 firefighters, 53 incident managers and plant operators. And as part of that contingent or cohort of firefighters and fire personnel, 40 women were part of that deployment. So it's fantastic that we can support our friends in other countries with our great fire expertise from here in Victoria. And of course, they return to look after and protect us in the upcoming fire season here. And we all know what the effects of climate change are now in regard to these extreme disasters that are happening around the world. So, of course, investing in training and upskilling for our firefighters is vital. And last week in Melton, the crews of Toowoomba, Rockbank, the Melton 4th Brigade, Comida, Bacchus Marsh, Rockbank, Amesbury and Mount Cottrell, as well as others, came together to do just that in a training exercise. And I've certainly written letters to a number of those units, both Toowoomba and Rockbank, in support of them seeking additional equipment to be able to perform their duties in protecting our local communities, in particular in such a fast-growing area. I want to shout out to our local firefighters and commend them for all the work that they do, and as I say, in the way that they protect us, both the FRV firefighters but also the CFA and the forest fire management crews. They do an amazing job. They're unsung heroes at times, and we really support them in all their efforts. And we have 140,000 volunteer firefighters who make up our unique system in bushfire response, and they do a wonderful job, and we thank them all for that. Acting Speaker, this legislation speaks specifically to the dangerous nature of their work and the training of our firefighters, and this legislation includes those three areas of female cancers, uterine, ovarian and cervical cancers for our firefighters. And as the former head of a union, I know how dangerous first responding roles are, and the safety and well-being of our dedicated firefighters and fire service personnel are of the utmost. And it should be that when someone sustains an injury at work, that they are able to be rehabilitated and compensated through a proper scheme, injury scheme, being our work cover scheme. And for too long, women's cancers have been overlooked, and I'm proud of this government and the work of the Attorney-General to fix these issues. And of course, it's undeniable that these individuals expose themselves to profound risks and perils in the line of their duty, and obviously when they're heading towards a fire, we're all running away from it. So it's an amazing role that they play, and we take it for granted that they just fight these fires and nothing will ever happen to them. They go home in a normal state, they go home in a normal physical state. We don't even understand how some of these cancers will evolve over the many years. So, of course, as I say, we introduced our presumptive legislation for firefighters previously, and then added to that with the mechanical people in the fire services, and now we're adding these three female cancers to be included in the presumptive legislation. Obviously, there's been some discussion around extending that even further. I think we've got to get this bill passed in this House and in the other House, and then I know that the Attorney-General has alluded to the fact that there could be further discussion about other cancers that could be introduced based on the proper research and data that is available to us. But let's get this bill done. It is a very important bill in supporting our firefighters across the board, but also there are some significant changes to other acts, and I'm going to run out of time, so I'm not going to get to those. but this is an important bill and I commend this bill to the House.